The spit that shook a nation. The sun rose over the grand palace, casting golden hues over the towering gates and the guards who stood rigid, unmoving like statues. Among them was Marcus Kane, a royal guard with a reputation for unshakable discipline and a stare that could make even the most brazen troublemakers think twice. His deep brown skin gleamed in the morning sun, his ceremonial uniform crisp and perfect, every button shining as though it had been placed there by royalty itself. Marcus had seen his fair share of hostility, but nothing could have prepared him for what would unfold that day. The incident. The cobbled streets in front of the palace were crowded as usual. Tourists snapped photos, children giggled as they tried to make the guards flinch, and locals went about their daily routines. It was a peaceful morning, until a storm approached. From across the street, a man marched with purpose, his heavy boots pounding against the pavement. He was tall, with graying hair and a face etched with years of anger. His name was Richard Crowley, a man notorious for stirring up trouble, especially when it came to those he considered unworthy of representing the nation. His beliefs were outdated, festering in the depths of resentment. Marcus noticed him immediately. His training had sharpened his senses to detect potential threats before they fully unfolded. Something about Crowley's stride, his clenched fists, and the dark sneer twisting his face told Marcus that trouble was about to unfold. Crowley stopped just inches from Marcus. His eyes, filled with contempt, bore into the guard's unflinching gaze. And then he spat. The wet slap of salada landing on Marcus's cheeks sent a wave of gasps rippling through the crowd. The palace gates, usually a place of awe and admiration, were now shrouded in an eerie silence. Mothers covered their children's eyes. A group of tourists, their phones raised to capture royal elegance, now inadvertently recorded an act of vile hatred. Marcus remained motionless. His fingers twitched ever so slightly near the hilt of his ceremonial sword. His jaw clenched, his heartbeat pounded in his ears. The smell of stale beer and tobacco lingered from Crowley's spit, the warm insult sliding down his cheek. But Marcus did not move. The Royal Guard's training was drilled into him. He was a sentinel, a symbol of restraint, discipline, and unwavering service to the country. He had faced far worse threats on the battlefield during his years in the military. This was a different kind of battle. Crowley grinned, expecting a reaction, expecting to break him. Marcus didn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp white cloth, and wiped his cheek with precision, as if erasing Crowley's existence from his skin. The crowd murmured, shifting in disbelief. Some expected Marcus to retaliate, others expected security to intervene. But before any action could be taken, the palace doors creaked open. An unforeseen turn. The heavy oak doors parted, and out stepped Captain Adrian Wallace, a towering man with a reputation for absolute authority. His uniform bore several medals, his posture one of the man who had seen it all and tolerated nothing. His sharp blue eyes locked onto Crowley. "You just committed an offense against the Royal Guard," Captain Wallace declared, his voice cutting through the tense air like a blade. "You will be detained immediately." Crowley scoffed. "For spitting. What law says I can't express my feelings?" "He's just a—" Silence. Wallace's voice was sharp, commanding. "Assaulting a guard, in any form, is a criminal act. You will be taken into custody." Crowley barely had time to react before two security officers grabbed him by the arms. He twisted, tried to pull free, but they had him in an iron grip. "This is ridiculous," Crowley barked, his bravado suddenly cracking. "This is political correctness gone mad." He just stood there like a coward. The crowd's energy shifted. Many cheered, others stood frozen, processing what had just unfolded before them. A young boy, no older than 7, stepped forward, his small voice cutting through the commotion. "Why didn't you fight back?" Marcus finally moved. He knelt to the boy's level, his dark brown eyes kind, yet firm. His voice was low, but strong. Because strength isn't about fighting, he said. It's about knowing when not to. The boy nodded, his small mind absorbing something far greater than he yet understood. The fallout. The video of the incident spread like wildfire. By nightfall, the footage of Marcus Kane standing resolute and unshaken had reached millions. News anchors debated the event, social media erupted with discussions, and two factions emerged: those who praised Marcus's restraint and those who mocked him for it. Marcus scrolled through the reactions later that night. This man is a hero. The level of self-control he has is unreal. Marcus Kane represents true honor. We should all strive to be like him. Why didn't he fight back? Does he think standing there makes him strong? Coward, you let him spit on you and did nothing. Pathetic. His wife, Naomi, entered the room, her expression filled with concern. You don't have to read those, you know, she said gently. Marcus exhaled. I want to know what the world sees, what they think. She sat beside him, placing a warm hand over his. What you did today, it mattered, she whispered. Not just for you, but for every person watching. People will always twist things, but the ones who truly understand, they'll see you for what you are. Marcus met her gaze, finding comfort in her words, but a small voice in the back of his head whispered, this isn't over. And he was right. The next threat. The following morning, Marcus received a message on his phone. Watch your back. He froze, staring at the screen. The message was from an unknown number. A slow, uneasy feeling crept up his spine. Naomi saw his face pale. Marcus, she asked hesitantly. He turned the screen toward her. Her face drained of color. What does this mean? She asked, her voice shaking. Marcus clenched his jaw. His military instincts told him one thing. The attack wasn't over. Crowley was just the beginning. The real danger was coming. And this time, Marcus wouldn't just be standing still. The threat in the shadows. Marcus Kane stared at the words on his phone screen. Watch your back. A chill crept up his spine. It wasn't just a random message. It was a warning. A declaration. His wife, Naomi, sat beside him on the couch, her fingers gripping his wrist tightly as she read the message. The soft glow of the lamp in their living room did little to chase away the unease that settled over them. This can't be random, she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with a quiet fear. Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. It's not. The events from the day before replayed in his mind like a film stuck on repeat. The spit, the silence, the arrest of Richard Crowley, the explosion of media attention. Now this. Marcus had faced threats before. As a former Marine, he had been through war zones, had stared death in the face more times than he could count. But this was different. This wasn't a battlefield. This was his home. And whoever sent this message knew where to find him. The fallout begins. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the message, turning his phone over in his hands like he could crush the words into dust if he just held on tight enough. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for Naomi, for their unborn child growing inside her. A knock at the door made him jolt upright, his instincts snapping into place. He was on his feet in an instant, one hand instinctively reaching for the weapon he kept hidden in the drawer by the couch. Naomi gasped. Who is it? Marcus moved toward the door, pressing his body close to the wall beside it, glancing at the clock. 2:34 a.m. Too late for visitors. Too early for safety. He took a breath, steeling himself before he called out. Who is it? Silence. Another knock. His grip on the gun tightened. This wasn't right. He glanced at Naomi, who had already moved toward the kitchen, clutching her phone in her hands, ready to call for help if needed. Marcus took a breath, exhaled slowly, and cracked open the door. A shadow stood in the hallway. The stranger at the door. Marcus Kane. The voice was calm, low, controlled. Marcus studied the man. He was tall, built like a soldier, his sharp features partially obscured by the shadows of the dimly lit hallway. He wore a dark coat, and his eyes gleamed with something cold, calculated. "Who's asking?" Marcus said, his voice steady, but firm. The man slowly reached into his coat pocket. Marcus tensed, his finger hovering near the trigger of his gun, ready to act. But instead of a weapon, the man pulled out a badge. MI5. Marcus frowned. British intelligence. The man gave a small nod. Agent Callum Drake. We need to talk. A bigger problem than he thought. Marcus led him inside, still wary but unwilling to turn away the chance for answers. Drake sat down on the couch, his expression unreadable as Naomi brought him a glass of water, her hands still trembling. "I saw the footage," Drake said after a moment, swirling the water in the glass absent-mindedly. "The video of the incident." Marcus remained silent. "It's gone viral," Drake continued. "Your face is everywhere, Marcus. News channels, social media, forums. You're being called a hero by some, a disgrace by others. And then there are those who see you as a target." Marcus clenched his jaw. "I've dealt with threats before." Drake shook his head. "Not like this." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Richard Crowley. He's not the main problem. He's a symptom, a tool, a puppet in something much larger." Marcus exchanged a glance with Naomi. Her grip on his wrist tightened again. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Drake sighed. "There's an underground network. A group. Nationalist extremists. They operate in the shadows, using social media and encrypted channels to spread their ideology. To recruit. To plan. They'd been quiet for a while. But after yesterday," he exhaled, "they're not quiet anymore." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a slow burn of anger mixed with something heavier. "So the message I got. Not just a random threat," Drake confirmed. "A warning. A challenge." He paused. "We intercepted some chatter online. They're talking about you, about how you humiliated one of their own, about how you're a symbol now. And symbols, Marcus." Drake's eyes darkened. "They either get worshipped or destroyed. The choice." Marcus leaned back, his mind racing. He had always known that hate was a disease, one that spread in silence, waiting for the right moment to lash out. But now, that disease had a name, a face, and it was looking right at him. "So, what do you want me to do?" he asked finally. Drake studied him for a long moment. "We're working on tracking down the people responsible for the threats, but we need you to lay low, at least for now." Marcus let out a humorless chuckle. "Lay low? You think if I just disappear, they'll stop?" Drake didn't respond. Marcus shook his head. "That's not who I am." Naomi reached for his hand, her fingers lacing through his. "Marcus." He turned to her. "I can't just sit here and pretend this isn't happening." He looked back at Drake. "You want me to hide, to back down. That's exactly what they want, and I won't give it to them." Drake sighed. "I figured you'd say that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a burner phone. He handed it to Marcus. "Take this," Drake said. "It's secure. If anything happens, if anything feels off, you call me." Marcus took the phone, his fingers closing around it. Drake stood, adjusting his coat. "And Marcus?" He looked up. "This isn't just about you anymore." Marcus nodded. He already knew that. The first attack. Drake left soon after, disappearing into the night like a shadow. Marcus and Naomi sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on them. Then, a crash. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the house. Naomi screamed. Marcus was on his feet in an instant, his instincts roaring to life. He grabbed his gun, rushing toward the sound. The front window was broken. A brick lay on the floor, surrounded by shards of glass. Marcus's heart pounded as he stepped forward. A piece of paper was tied to the brick. He picked it up, his hand steady, but his stomach churning. The message was scrawled in red ink. "You were warned. This is just the beginning." Marcus's grip tightened. His enemies weren't just sending threats anymore. They were making their first move. And Marcus Kane, he was ready for war. The war begins. The brick lay on the floor, surrounded by shattered glass. The message attached to it, scrawled in red ink, sent a cold shiver down Marcus Kane's spine. "You were warned. This is just the beginning." The air in the house felt heavy, almost suffocating. Naomi stood frozen in the doorway, one hand covering her mouth, the other protectively resting on her stomach. The sound of glass crunching under Marcus's boots was the only noise in the room. His hands clenched into fists. First, the spit. Then, the threat on his phone. Now this. Whoever these people were, they were done talking. They had started acting. Marcus turned toward Naomi. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though her body trembled. "Marcus, this isn't just a message anymore." He knew she was right. This was a warning shot. And the next one. It wouldn't be a brick. The immediate aftermath. Marcus pulled out the burner phone that Agent Callum Drake from MI5 had given him the night before. He dialed the number, his heart pounding in his ears. Drake answered on the first ring. "What happened?" "They escalated," Marcus said, his voice like steel. "Someone just threw a brick through my window. Left a note." There was a pause. Then Drake's voice came through, clipped and professional. "Are you and Naomi safe?" "For now. I'm sending a team to your location. Do not leave the house." Marcus hung up and exhaled, trying to steady himself. But his gut told him something. This wasn't over. He moved to the front door and checked the street outside. The night was dark, but the streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. Everything looked normal. Too normal. But someone had been there. Someone had stood outside their home and decided to send a message. Marcus's grip on his gun tightened. He wasn't waiting for MI5 to protect his family. He was going to end this himself. The investigation begins. Drake and his team arrived within 20 minutes, their presence professional and efficient. Armed agents in plain clothes spread out, securing the perimeter while another team entered the house to inspect the scene. Drake knelt near the shattered window, picking up the brick. He studied it, his face unreadable. "They're getting bolder," he muttered. "Whoever did this wanted to make sure you got the message loud and clear." Marcus folded his arms. "They're cowards, hiding behind bricks and threats." Drake sighed. "Not cowards. Terrorists. And terrorists don't stop unless someone stops them first." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we stop them." Drake stood up, brushing the dust off his hands. "We traced the number that sent you the first message. It was a burner phone, but we managed to track the last location it pinged from, an abandoned warehouse in East London." Marcus's stomach turned. "Then that's where we go." Drake shook his head. "Marcus, you're not a cop. You're not MI5. You're already a target." Marcus cut him off. "And that's exactly why I need to be there." His eyes darkened. "I know how these people think, Drake. I fought men like them before. They think fear will control me." Drake studied him for a long moment, then exhaled sharply. "Fine, but you follow my lead." Marcus nodded. It was time to take the fight to them. The warehouse raid. The drive to the warehouse was tense. The MI5 agents, fully equipped, checked their weapons and gear, their expressions unreadable. Marcus, sitting in the back of the unmarked SUV, stared out the window, his mind sharp. When they arrived, the warehouse loomed in the darkness like a forgotten beast, its rusted exterior illuminated by the occasional flicker of a nearby street lamp. Drake signaled to his team. "Move in." The agents spread out, moving like ghosts in the night, covering the exits. Marcus followed closely behind Drake as they approached the side entrance. Drake pulled out a lock-picking tool and got to work. Within seconds, the door clicked open, and they slipped inside. The interior was what Marcus expected: old, abandoned machinery, dust-covered floors, and stacks of wooden crates. But what caught his eye was the setup in the center of the warehouse. A table covered in papers, maps, and laptops. And standing near it, two men speaking in hushed voices. Drake gave a signal. Go. The MI5 agents moved like lightning, storming the room, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Down on the floor. The two men panicked, reaching for their belts. Marcus moved first. Before one of them could grab a weapon, Marcus lunged forward, slamming the man's wrist against the table, forcing him to drop whatever he was reaching for. The man grunted in pain, but before he could retaliate, Marcus struck again, a clean blow to the side of the head. He went down, hard. The other suspect tried to run but was tackled to the ground by an MI5 agent. In under 30 seconds, it was over. The discovery. Drake and the team immediately started combing through the evidence on the table. The papers, the maps, they were detailed plans of something much bigger than just Marcus. Drake picked up one of the documents, his expression darkening. This isn't just about you, Marcus. Marcus stepped forward, scanning the page. The words at the top made his blood run cold. Operation de la CKODT. Final Phase 72 HOURs. He exhaled slowly. What is this? Drake handed him another paper. It's an attack plan. Marcus's stomach turned as he read. The targets: government buildings, public transportation hubs, cultural landmarks, and at the center of the plan, the Royal Palace. A race against time. This is bigger than we thought, Drake muttered, running a hand down his face. This isn't just a hate group. This is a full-fledged terrorist cell. Marcus clenched his fists. And in 3 days, they're going to attack. One of the MI5 agents called out, "Sir, you need to see this." They turned toward the laptop screen. A video was playing. Marcus's own face appeared on the screen. The voice speaking over the footage was distorted, but the words made Marcus's blood boil. Marcus Kane thinks he represents this nation, but he is a symbol of weakness, of decay. He will not stand in our way. In 72 hours, we will send a message that cannot be ignored. The palace will burn, and Kane will fall. The video cut to black. Drake exhaled sharply. They're coming for you, Marcus. Marcus's hands curled into fists. Then we take the fight to them. Before they strike first. The war had begun. The clock was ticking. Marcus was no longer just a target. He was standing in the center of a battlefield. And if these terrorists thought he was going to sit back and let them win, they were about to learn a very painful lesson. The countdown to chaos. 72 hours before the attack. The abandoned warehouse smelled of rust and dust, the air thick with the scent of something even more dangerous: conspiracy. Marcus Kane stood motionless, his eyes locked on the screen displaying his own face. The distorted voice from the video echoed in his head. Marcus Kane thinks he represents this nation, but he is a symbol of weakness, of decay. He will not stand in our way. In 72 hours, we will send a message that cannot be ignored. The palace will burn, and Kane will fall. The video ended. Silence. Then, the click of a gun safety being released. Marcus turned, instincts sharp. One of the suspects MI5 had captured, the man Marcus had taken down earlier, had somehow managed to slip free from his restraints. His fingers twitched around the grip of a pistol, aimed directly at Marcus's chest. Time slowed. Marcus reacted instantly. He lunged forward, grabbing the barrel of the gun with one hand and twisting the man's wrist with the other. A shot fired. VANG. The bullet slicing past Marcus's ear, so close he could feel the heat of it. But Marcus didn't stop. With a sharp pivot of his hips, he wrenched the gun away and drove his elbow into the man's face. The suspect collapsed, blood pouring from his nose. MI5 agents rushed forward, restraining him properly this time. Drake exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "You've got to stop making my job harder, Kane." Marcus clenched his fists. "This is bigger than you thought. Bigger than me." He gestured to the laptop still displaying the video. "This isn't just an extremist group. This is a coordinated terrorist network, and they have a plan." Drake's face was grim. "Then we only have 72 hours to stop them." A hidden threat in the city. Back at MI5 headquarters, the evidence was piling up. Operation Blackout wasn't just an attack. It was a declaration of war. The group had planted multiple bombs in key locations across the city, all set to detonate simultaneously. Their ultimate goal: collapse public transportation, destroy government institutions, strike at the heart of the nation, the royal palace. And worst of all, they were already in position. Drake's team worked tirelessly, cross-referencing maps, intercepted messages, and movement patterns. They needed to locate every bomb before it was too late. But as the minutes ticked by, something wasn't adding up. None of this fits their usual method. An MI5 analyst muttered, scanning the data. "They're being too bold, too open. It's like they want us to find them." Marcus frowned. "Because they do." Everyone in the room turned toward him. He stepped forward, placing his hands on the table. "Think about it. These people have operated in the shadows for years. They don't make mistakes. So why now? Why leave an obvious trail?" Drake's eyes widened slightly. He saw it now, too. "They're leading us into a trap." Marcus nodded. "They're baiting us into focusing on certain locations, so we'll miss the real target." Silence settled over the room like a storm cloud. Then a young analyst spoke, voice hesitant. What if the royal palace isn't the real target?" Everyone froze. "The real target? A nation in peril." "Pull up everything we have on upcoming public events," Marcus ordered. The analyst typed furiously on her keyboard. Within seconds, a list of high-profile gatherings appeared on the screen. One in particular stood out: the Unity Summit. Marcus's heart stopped for a second. The Unity Summit was an international event, bringing together political leaders, dignitaries, and thousands of civilians to discuss global peace efforts. It was scheduled to take place the same day as the attack, and it was being held in the National Exhibition Center, one of the largest buildings in the country. "Oh, hell," Drake whispered. Marcus's hands curled into fists. The bombs weren't meant for the palace. They were meant for the Unity Summit. The race against time. Drake moved into action. "Get me real-time surveillance on the exhibition center. Deploy tactical teams to sweep the entire area. I want eyes everywhere." Marcus exhaled, running a hand down his face. "If they pull this off, it won't just be an attack. It'll be a massacre." The next hours were a blur of planning, coordination, and tension. The city was placed on high alert, security tightened, and counter-terrorism units mobilized. But Marcus knew it wasn't enough. They weren't just dealing with one attack. They were dealing with a network. And their enemies. They were already watching. The message. As the team worked through the night, Marcus received another message on his burner phone. It was a video. He hesitated for only a second before pressing play. The screen flickered to life, revealing a dark room. A figure in a mask stepped forward. A deep, robotic voice filled the silence. "You think you've uncovered the plan, Marcus Kane, but you are a fool. You may find the bombs, but you will never find us. We are the storm, and when the clock strikes 0, your country will burn." The camera zoomed out. Marcus's blood ran cold. A man was bound to a chair in the background. Beaten. Bloodied. Marcus knew him instantly. Captain Adrian Wallace. His mentor. His commander. The figure in the mask reached forward, gripping Wallace's hair, forcing his face toward the camera. Wallace's swollen lips parted. His voice was hoarse. Don't stop them. Then the screen went black. Marcus's fingers tightened around the phone. Drake was already reading his expression. What? Marcus turned the screen toward him. The room fell silent. Shit, Drake muttered. They have Wallace. Marcus's heartbeat pounded in his ears. This wasn't just an attack anymore. This was personal. And Marcus Kane. He was about to burn their entire operation to the ground. The hunt for the ghosts. Marcus Kane stared at the dark screen of his phone, his grip tightening as the last words of Captain Adrian Wallace echoed in his mind. Don't stop them. The man who had trained him, guided him, and stood beside him in countless battles was now a hostage, and Marcus knew what that meant. They weren't just threatening him anymore. They were taunting him. They wanted him to act recklessly. And worse, they knew him well enough to know he would. Drake was already making calls, his voice sharp as he coordinated with his MI5 team. Agents rushed around the headquarters, scanning security feeds, tracking phone signals, trying to find Wallace before it was too late. Marcus didn't wait. He turned to Drake. Where was the video sent from? Drake held up a hand, still on the phone. He nodded, listening to the analyst on the other end. Finally, he muttered, "Got it," and hung up. He looked at Marcus. The video was uploaded through an encrypted channel. Whoever sent it masked their IP, but only for a few minutes. Marcus's stomach clenched. So we have something. Drake's expression darkened. We traced it back to an abandoned building on the East Docks, a place called Pier 17. Marcus nodded. Then that's where we go. Drake hesitated. Marcus, listen to me. No, Marcus interrupted. His voice was quiet, but the rage underneath it was boiling. They took Wallace. They're not playing games anymore. Neither am I. Drake met his gaze for a long moment. Then he sighed. All right, but we do this my way. Marcus nodded. He didn't care how they did it, as long as they got Wallace back. The raid on Pier 17. The MI5 team moved in the dead of night, slipping through the streets like shadows. Pier 17 sat on the edge of the city, an old warehouse that had been abandoned for years. The docks stretched out into the black water, a perfect place for someone to hide and disappear. Marcus crouched behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, his earpiece buzzing with updates from the tactical team. Heat signatures inside, one of the agents whispered through the radio. 5 hostiles. No sign of Wallace yet. Drake's voice came through next. We breach on my command. Marcus's heart pounded. If Wallace was in there, he didn't have much time. Drake raised a fist. Go. The team moved fast and hard. Marcus was first through the door, his gun raised. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of crates and shadows. The first enemy came out of the dark, raising his rifle. Marcus fired once, clean through the shoulder. The man collapsed with a cry, the gun clattering to the floor. Another lunge from behind a pillar, swinging a crowbar. Marcus sidestepped, twisting the man's wrist and driving him into the concrete with a brutal elbow to the ribs. Chaos exploded around them. Gunfire, shouting. The MI5 team moved with ruthless efficiency, sweeping the warehouse and taking down threats one by one. Then, a sound. A muffled groan. Marcus spun toward the back of the warehouse, his eyes locking onto a steel door slightly ajar. His chest tightened. Wallace. He ran. Rescue and retribution. Marcus kicked the door open. The room inside was small, dark, and filled with the stench of sweat and blood. Captain Wallace sat tied to a chair, his face swollen and bruised. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes, those sharp, steel-gray eyes, locked onto Marcus with something close to relief. You took your damn time, Wallace rasped. Marcus moved quickly, cutting the ropes from Wallace's wrists. You good? Wallace grunted as he tried to stand. Feel like I got hit by a bloody truck, but I'll live. Marcus's relief was short-lived. because just then a new voice echoed from the warehouse speakers. Cold, calculated, familiar. "Oh, Marcus, you think you've won." Marcus froze. The masked leader from the video. The one who had held Wallace hostage. A speaker somewhere crackled. "You're playing checkers. I'm playing chess. And you just made your move." Then, the sound of a detonator clicking. The explosion. The warehouse exploded in a roar of flames and debris. Marcus barely had time to throw himself over Wallace before the shockwave tore through the room, sending them both crashing to the ground. The walls shook, flames licking the ceiling, the air thick with smoke and dust. Drake's voice yelled through the earpiece. "Marcus, Marcus, do you copy?" Marcus coughed violently, his ears ringing. He turned to Wallace, who was groaning but alive. They needed to move. Now, ignoring the pain, Marcus dragged Wallace to his feet and forced him toward the door. Outside, the MI5 team was pulling back, gunfire still echoing in the distance. The fire was spreading fast. Marcus pushed forward, determined to get Wallace out alive. They reached the exit just as another secondary explosion went off behind them, sending them sprawling onto the pavement. Marcus's head spun, his lungs burning. But they were alive. And now Marcus wanted answers. The hunt for Apex. Back at MI5 headquarters, the tension was thick. Wallace was in medical care, and the captured suspects were being interrogated. But Marcus, he was focused on one thing: finding the real mastermind. The masked leader had played them, led them to Wallace as bait. And now, the real attack, the one on the Unity Summit, was still coming. Drake entered the room, dropping a file on the table. "We've got a name." Marcus looked up, his body tensed. "Apex." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Drake tapped the file. "The real leader behind Operation Blackout. The one who's been orchestrating all of this from the start." Marcus flipped open the file. Inside was a photograph. His stomach twisted, because the face staring back at him. He knew it. The face of the enemy. 48 hours until the attack. Marcus Kane sat at the edge of the MI5 command center, staring at the file in front of him. Apex. The real mastermind behind Operation Blackout. The person orchestrating the chaos. The one who had almost gotten Captain Wallace killed. Drake stood beside him, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes carried the weight of a man who had seen monsters before. Marcus opened the file, his stomach clenched. The face staring back at him was familiar. A woman, mid-30s. Dark brown hair tied back in a professional ponytail. Sharp, intelligent green eyes. A cold, detached expression. Eleanor Graves. Marcus's mind reeled as memories flashed through his head. She had once been a rising star in British intelligence, a military strategist, an expert in counter-terrorism, someone who had dedicated her life to stopping extremists. And now, she was leading one. Marcus looked up. "This has to be a mistake." Drake exhaled. "It's not." Marcus shook his head. Eleanor Graves was a patriot. She worked for the government. I met her once when I was in the military. She helped lead operations against radical groups. She wouldn't. "She did," Drake interrupted. His tone was grim. "And not just recently. We've been digging through old records. Eleanor Graves didn't just switch sides overnight. She's been planning this for years." Marcus frowned, flipping through the pages. It detailed everything. Eleanor Graves went off the grid 4 years ago. She had been quietly funneling intelligence to extremist groups while still working within the system. When she disappeared, MI5 assumed she was dead. She wasn't dead. She had been building an army. Marcus clenched his fists. "Where is she?" Drake sighed. "That's the problem. She's a ghost. She's been playing chess while the rest of us are playing checkers. She knew we'd find Wallace. She knew we'd think the royal palace was the real target. And now, Drake pointed to the red circle on the map, the Unity Summit. She's going to finish what she started. The message from Apex. As if on cue, Marcus's burner phone buzzed. A video message. He pressed play. Eleanor Graves appeared on the screen, sitting in a dimly lit room. She looked calm, collected, in control. "Marcus Kane," she said, her voice smooth and precise. "I was hoping it would be you." Marcus felt a cold rage burn in his chest. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "You're probably wondering why, aren't you? Why I left. Why I turned my back on the system." She smirked. "It's simple. The system is rotting from the inside. The politicians who stand on their podiums and preach about unity. They don't care about this country. They don't care about its people. They care about power." She tilted her head. "You, of all people, should understand that." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Eleanor's green eyes darkened. "You can try to stop me. You can chase shadows all you want. But in 48 hours, the world will watch as the foundations of your precious country crumble." She smiled. "Oh, and Marcus." She leaned closer to the camera. "If you're not careful, your wife will be the first to die." The screen cut to black. Marcus stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. His heart pounded as fury surged through his veins. "Naomi." Drake cursed under his breath. "Shit." Marcus grabbed his jacket. "I'm going home. Now." Drake stepped in front of him. "No, you're not. If she's threatening Naomi, it means she's already watching her. You go back now. You could lead them straight to her." Marcus's hands shook with rage. "If they touch my wife, they won't." Drake's voice was firm. "We're sending a team to your house. We'll move Naomi to a safe location. But if you want to stop this, we need to find Eleanor." Marcus forced himself to breathe. Think. Naomi would be protected. But Eleanor Graves needed to be stopped. Marcus clenched his fists. "Then let's find her." Tracking the ghost. The next 12 hours were a blur. MI5 worked around the clock, searching for any trace of Eleanor. Her bank accounts were empty. Her last known aliases were burned. But she had made one mistake. "Got something," one of the analysts called out. 3 weeks ago, she used an encrypted line to contact an arms dealer. Name's Victor Henshaw. Drake nodded. "Where?" The analyst smirked. "That's the good news. Henshaw's been on our watch list for months. We know exactly where he is." Marcus grabbed his gun. "Then let's pay him a visit." The interrogation. 3:00 a.m. A warehouse outside the city. The warehouse was dark, save for a single flickering light above Victor Henshaw's head. The arms dealer sat tied to a chair, blood trickling from his nose. He had tried to run. Marcus had made sure he didn't get far. Marcus loomed over him, voice low and cold. "Where is Eleanor Graves?" Henshaw spat blood onto the floor. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus didn't blink. Wrong answer. He grabbed a chair and slammed it down in front of Henshaw, the metal screeching against the floor. Then he sat, leaning forward, his eyes dark with rage. "You don't understand what's happening here, Victor." His voice was dangerously calm. "You think this is a normal interrogation. It's not." Marcus leaned in closer. "This isn't me asking for information. This is me giving you one chance to save your own skin." Henshaw hesitated. Marcus's jaw clenched. "You gave Graves weapons," Marcus said. "You supplied her with explosives. You think MI5 is going to let that slide? They'll bury you." Silence. Then Henshaw sighed, his shoulders sagging. "She's planning something big," he muttered. "She's been hiding out in an old airfield outside the city. Said it was the final phase." Marcus stood immediately. "Where?" Henshaw swallowed. "Norfolk Air Base. The abandoned hangars." Drake's eyes widened. "That's 20 miles from the Unity Summit." Marcus turned toward the door. "We move now." The final countdown. 24 hours until the attack. Marcus sat in the back of the Mi-5 transport vehicle, checking his weapons. This was it. Eleanor Graves had played her hand. And now, Marcus was about to end the game. As the city lights blurred past the window, he clenched his fists. No more running. No more hiding. This was war. And Marcus Kane. He was about to win. The endgame. 24 hours until the attack. The storm was coming. Marcus Kane sat in the back of the Mi-5 tactical vehicle, the interior vibrating slightly as the armored wheels ate up the distance to Norfolk Air Base, the last known location of Eleanor Graves, the mastermind behind Operation Blackout. This was it. Months of planning, subterfuge, and attacks had led to this moment. The Unity Summit was only 1 day away, and if Eleanor's plan succeeded, the world wouldn't just be watching an event. It would be watching a massacre. The time for strategy was over. This was war. And Marcus, he was done playing. The briefing before the storm. The inside of the Mi-5 mobile command unit was filled with tension. Analysts hovered over screens displaying surveillance footage of the abandoned Norfolk Air Base, while tactical officers checked and double-checked their weapons. Drake stood at the head of the table, his expression grim. "Here's what we know," he began. "Eleanor Graves has been using the airbase as a staging ground. She has a small army of extremists guarding the location. We believe she's using the base to store explosives, weapons, and tactical equipment. This is likely where the final attack will be launched from." Drake turned to Marcus. "Our mission is simple: infiltrate, neutralize, and capture Eleanor alive." Marcus nodded. Simple never meant easy. Drake continued. "We'll deploy in 3 teams: Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Alpha team, Marcus and 5 operators. Direct assault team, entering through the hangar. Bravo team, sniper support, positioned on the nearby control tower. Charlie team, securing perimeter exits, cutting off any escape routes." Drake's voice dropped slightly. "Make no mistake, this is going to be a fight. Eleanor is expecting us. She's ready, and if she has a failsafe, she'll use it." Marcus cracked his knuckles. "Then we make sure she never gets the chance." Drake gave a sharp nod. "Gear up. We move in 20 minutes. The infiltration. Time: 23:30. Location: Norfolk Air Base. Perimeter." The night was thick with tension. Marcus moved like a shadow through the overgrown tarmac, the weight of his rifle firm in his hands. Alpha team advanced with silent precision, moving toward the rusting hangars that loomed in the moonlight. In his earpiece, Bravo team's sniper whispered. 2 guards at the entrance, armed, waiting for something. Drake's voice cut in. "Marcus." Marcus raised his rifle, lining up his shot. "I got this." His finger squeezed the trigger. Pop, pop. Both guards dropped without a sound. The team moved forward. Inside the hangar, lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across metal crates, weapons, and explosives stacked waist-high. But what caught Marcus's attention was a large black transport truck parked at the center of the hangar. It was loaded with barrels marked TATP, a volatile explosive compound used in terrorist attacks worldwide. His stomach clenched. This wasn't just a weapons cache. This was the bomb meant for the Unity Summit. Drake's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Confirm. Do you see it?" Marcus crouched behind cover. "It's here. And it's massive." "Shit," Drake muttered. "Okay, we need to disable it before Eleanor can deploy it." Marcus motioned for the bomb squad to move in. And that's when everything went to hell. The ambush. A voice echoed from a hidden speaker system in the hangar. "Ah, Marcus Kane. Right on time." Marcus's stomach dropped. Then, the lights cut out. Gunfire erupted from the catwalks above, bullets sparking against metal crates. The enemy had been waiting. Marcus dove behind cover as Alpha Team returned fire. The hangar erupted into a war zone, bullets tearing through the air, sparks flying, men shouting. Marcus looked toward the transport truck. A figure was moving toward it in the darkness. Eleanor. She was trying to escape. Marcus gritted his teeth. Drake, cover me. Then he ran. The final confrontation. Eleanor Graves moved with calculated speed, weaving through the chaos toward the driver's seat of the truck. Marcus sprinted after her, ducking bullets, leaping over debris. He reached her just as she yanked open the truck door. Marcus grabbed her by the arm, ripping her away from the vehicle. She spun faster than he expected and threw a brutal punch. Marcus barely dodged it, the force of it whistling past his ear. Eleanor was strong, but Marcus was faster. He countered, a crushing blow to her ribs. She staggered but recovered quickly, pulling a knife from her belt. Her green eyes burned with hatred. "You think you've won," she snarled. "You think stopping this truck will change anything." Marcus sidestepped, grabbing her wrist and twisting the knife away. "I don't think. I know." She lunged. He dodged. She was fast, but Marcus was a warrior. He caught her arm mid-strike, twisting it behind her back and slamming her face first against the truck. Eleanor gasped, struggling. "Go on," she spat. "Kill me." Marcus's grip tightened. His rage burned. She had threatened Naomi. She had tortured Wallace. She had planned to massacre thousands. She deserved death. But Marcus wasn't a murderer. "You don't get to die," he whispered coldly. "You get to live, in a cell, watching everything you fought for fall apart." Drake appeared behind him. "We've secured the hangar. Perimeter's clear." Marcus nodded. He released Eleanor, shoving her forward toward the MI5 agents waiting to take her away. Drake clapped a hand on his shoulder. "It's over." Marcus exhaled. Yeah. But deep down he knew this war was never truly over. Epilogue. The cost of war. The next morning, Marcus stood on the balcony of his apartment, watching the sunrise. Behind him, Naomi stepped outside, placing a hand on his chest. "It's over," she whispered. Marcus didn't answer at first. He watched the city below. The people moving, laughing, living, completely unaware of how close they had come to death. Finally, he exhaled. "For now." Naomi studied his face. "But you're not done, are you?" Marcus turned to her. "No," he admitted. "I'm not. There would always be another enemy, another fight, another war. But as long as he was alive, he'd be there to stop it."